We just heard the story of Jesus' birth from the Gospel of Luke, which is told from a story perspective. But the Gospel of John talks about it poetically and symbolically. John 1, verse 5 describes the coming of the Christ this way: "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it." The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. And my brain fills in what I think should come next, and that is the light overcomes the darkness. But John doesn't actually say that. He simply says the darkness did not overtake the light. But we easily fall into these dualities where darkness is bad and light is good, and therefore they must be in battle with each other. But a look into the biblical story of the origins of darkness and light show us that light and dark are not enemies. They are partners. And we need the dark just as much as we need the light. Think of how one of the Genesis creation stories begin. It says, "Darkness covered the face of the deep." This was before anything had been created. Darkness covered the face of the deep, while a wind from God swept over the face of the waters. Now, with our preconceived notions about light conquering darkness, we might think that this wind from God, which could also be translated as the breath of God or the Spirit of God, that this wind from God sweeps over the darkness like a broom, or hovers over this formless void like a drone getting ready to strike. But it's not like that at all. When you dig into the nuances of the original Hebrew in Genesis chapter 1, that word that's translated swept is used only one other time, and it's in Deuteronomy chapter 32, and it refers to a mother eagle hovering over its young. It says this: "As an eagle stirs up its nest and hovers over its young, as it spreads its wings, takes them up, and bears them aloft on its pinions, so is my love for my child Israel." This is not a hovering that is anticipating conquering the dark. It's a hovering that is anticipating something else. There's a creative energy. There's a generative force in this spirit, not a force of domination. And that is how the light comes forth. Not to shut down the darkness, but to bring about a generative partnership between darkness and light. You can see the power of their partnership in the pinks and purples of the sunset. You can see the power of the partnership of light and dark in the awe that comes over you when you look up into the night sky when it's clear, or in the wonder of a solar eclipse. There's magic that happens when the light and the dark partner with each other. John chapter 1, verse 5, again, "The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. And neither did the light overtake the dark." And thank goodness, because we need the dark. Keeping the lights on in prison is a form of torture. We need the dark. We need it for our circadian rhythms. We need darkness for sensory decompression and for space to be unobserved. It is in the shadows, my friends, that the most radical acts of love and resistance have always taken place. The darkness is where radical acts of love and resistance take their form. We live in a time where radical acts of love and resistance are so desperately needed. The force of domination is at work. And especially people of color and the queer community have very real reasons to live in fear. And then there's economic uncertainty, disruption all over the place, ecological disaster. There is so much to fear. And that fear of the dark can make us paralyzed. But my friends, we must learn to walk in the dark. Students and activists in the Albany movement and the Freedom Rides in the 1960s practiced walking in the dark in the Hinds County Jail. The authorities tried to use the darkness of the cell to break the spirits of the protesters. But instead of falling into despair, the prisoners began to sing. Bernice Johnson Regan, who was the founder of the band Sweet Honey in the Rock, was in that jail that night, and she recalls how the walls of the jail would literally vibrate with the sound of the multitude of people singing, "We shall overcome," in the dark. One activist noted that a policeman came to one cell visibly shaking and asked them to stop singing because the music was more powerful than his weapon. The dark space of that cell, when those brave people refused to live in fear of it, became a cathedral of solidarity with a profound ripple effect. Before the LGBTQ movement became more public, queer and trans people, especially queer and trans people of color, had to create their own worlds too in the shadows of the night. They formed secret balls in the 1880s and in the ballroom culture of the 1970s and 80s. These events, these gatherings happened at night in basement bars and community centers, and radical love showed up there in the dark. These gatherings gave birth to the house system. For many young LGBTQ youth who'd been rejected by their biological families, these houses, these gatherings, provided literal shelter, food, and a chosen mother or a chosen father. These people, driven into the shadows, turned those shadows into a palace of belonging and care. My friends, walking in the darkness isn't about being lost. It's about having the courage to build something beautiful in the spaces where the world thinks nothing can grow. We've been taught to fear the dark. But what if we could approach the dark in the same way as the Spirit of God hovering over the face of the darkness, looking for what might come about? What might happen if we approached the fear of the dark with courage to look for new things coming about? The darkness is not a place to be feared. Jesus, God in God's wisdom, chose to show up in the darkness of Mary's womb. in the darkness of the night of Bethlehem, in the darkness of the displacement of Mary and Joseph, who had to leave their home because the empire said so at a terribly tender time. Beautiful, profound things show up in the dark when we have the courage to be present to it. So, what is the role of the light in the dark? My friends, we're about to light the candles, which is such a beautiful representation of the light shining in the darkness, not to overcome the darkness, but to partner with it in a beautiful way. These candles don't turn the night into day. They just help us to see the face of the person standing next to us. And seeing the face of the person next to us, really seeing it, knowing that we are not alone, knowing the humanity of others, that makes all the difference. My friends, the light shines in the darkness. It's a beautiful partnership for the hope of the world.